There is one question that has followed Kurt Cobain for decades. Not how he died, but how long he had been dying before anyone noticed. On the morning of April 8, 1994, America woke up to a single sentence repeated on radios and televisions across the country. Kurt Cobain was dead. He was 27 years old, the voice behind Nirvana, the reluctant face of grunge, a man who became a symbol for millions while quietly unraveling in private. The official ruling was suicide. Clear, clinical, final. But the body left behind told a much longer story. One that began years before the trigger was ever pulled. To understand the autopsy, we first need to understand the slow collapse that made it inevitable. Kurt Donald Cobain was born on February 20th, 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington. A small logging town, industrial, rough, emotionally closed. Aberdeen was not a place built for sensitivity, and Kurt was sensitive. From childhood, his home was unstable. Alcohol abuse, constant arguments, and emotional neglect shaped his earliest years. He later described his family as deeply dysfunctional, a place where security never fully existed. When his parents divorced, Kurt was just 9 years old. Something fundamental broke. Friends noticed the change immediately. He became withdrawn, ashamed, angry. The idea of a normal family haunted him. He spoke openly about feeling embarrassed by his parents, about wanting a structure he never had. This wasn't rebellion, it was grief. At around 7 years old, Kurt was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He was placed on Ritalin, a stimulant that alters dopamine regulation in the brain. To counteract the insomnia it caused, doctors also prescribed sedatives. Before he was old enough to understand pain, Kurt learned that chemicals could change how he felt. This mattered, not because medication caused addiction, but because it normalized the idea that emotional regulation came from substances. His mind never learned calm naturally, it learned chemistry. As Kurt entered adolescence, the gap between him and his environment widened. He hated sports, hated hunting, hated traditional masculinity. He was bullied, physically assaulted, labeled strange. Some classmates assumed he was gay simply because he didn't fit their idea of what a boy should be. Kurt didn't care about fitting in, but he cared deeply about being unwanted. After escalating conflicts at home, he was eventually forced out. Still a teenager, Kurt drifted between friends' couches, cars, abandoned buildings, and periods of near homelessness. There was no safety net, there was only survival. Music didn't make Kurt happy, it made him functional. From an early age, he showed natural talent. Singing, guitar, drawing, writing, creating became the only way he knew how to process emotion without imploding. When Nirvana formed, Kurt finally found something that made sense. The band's sound was raw, simple, aggressive, and vulnerable, exactly like him. When Nevermind was released in 1991, the world changed overnight. Smells Like Teen Spirit was everywhere, and suddenly, Kurt Cobain wasn't just a musician, he was an icon. Fame arrived faster than Kurt could psychologically process. One moment he was sleeping in vans. The next, he was the most visible rock figure on the planet. But fame didn't heal anything. It amplified everything. He felt misunderstood, exploited, reduced to a symbol he never wanted to represent. Interviews exhausted him, media narratives angered him, fans projected meaning onto him that he never intended. Though some later claimed he never wanted fame, the truth is more complicated. Kurt worked relentlessly to succeed, but he wasn't prepared for what success would do to him. While the world focused on his music, Kurt's body was deteriorating. For years, he suffered from severe, chronic stomach pain. The pain was debilitating. He underwent multiple endoscopic procedures. Doctors repeatedly found irritation, but no clear organic cause, no definitive diagnosis. Kurt believed the pain was psychosomatic: anger, anxiety, trauma, pain without a visible wound. He also lived with scoliosis, a curvature of the spine that caused constant discomfort and fatigue. While not fatal, it added to the physical burden he carried every day. To Kurt, this wasn't abstract suffering. It was constant. Kurt insisted he didn't use heroin to get high. He said he used it to feel normal. To him, heroin was relief, silence, temporary peace. Friends saw something else. They saw addiction tightening its grip. By 1993, overdoses were no longer rare. His weight dropped dramatically. He nodded off during interviews. Emergency interventions became routine. His marriage to Courtney Love intensified everything. They were deeply connected, deeply volatile, and deeply dependent on the same substances. Their relationship was passionate, chaotic, and constantly under public scrutiny. When their daughter, Frances Bean, was born, the pressure multiplied. The media watched. Authorities intervened. Custody was briefly taken away. Kurt spiraled further inward. In March of 1994, while in Rome, Kurt ingested a dangerous combination of pills and alcohol. He was found unconscious. Publicly, it was framed as an accident. Privately, many around him believed it was a suicide attempt. Kurt survived. But something changed. Those close to him began to speak openly about fear, not of relapse, but of death. Later that month, friends and family staged an intervention. Kurt reacted with anger and denial. Still, he agreed to enter rehabilitation in Los Angeles. There was a brief moment of hope. 2 days later, he climbed a wall and escaped the facility. Some said he missed his daughter. Others believed he was terrified of facing life without heroin. After leaving rehab, Kurt disappeared. For several days, no one knew where he was. When Kurt Cobain vanished after leaving rehab, the collapse was no longer metaphorical. It was physical, and somewhere in Seattle, his body was already approaching the moment that would define his legacy forever. But the story does not end with disappearance, because what mattered most was not where Kurt went. It was what his body would later reveal. Part 2 will examine the discovery, the autopsy, and the evidence, line by line, without myth, without speculation, and without excuses. When Kurt Cobain disappeared after leaving rehab, the world didn't panic. People assumed he needed space, that he was hiding, that he would resurface. No one imagined that, while phones rang unanswered, his body was already lying alone, waiting to be found. By the time Kurt Cobain was discovered, the story was no longer about where he had gone. It was about what his body could still say. On April 8, 1994, an electrician arrived at Kurt Cobain's Seattle property to install security lighting. While working near the garage, he noticed something inside a small structure above it, a greenhouse-like room that had not drawn attention before. Inside, he saw a body. At first, he believed it might be a mannequin. Then he realized it wasn't. Kurt Cobain was lying on the floor of the room, motionless. Police were called immediately. By the time authorities arrived, it was clear that Kurt had been dead for several days. Later estimates placed the date of death at April 5th. 3 days had passed. Kurt Cobain was found inside the room above the garage, often referred to as the greenhouse. A shotgun rested against his body. Nearby were personal items, including drug paraphernalia and a handwritten note. The room showed no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no defensive wounds, no evidence of another person being present. The scene was quiet, too quiet. The autopsy determined the cause of death as a single gunshot wound to the head. The weapon was identified as a 20-gauge Remington shotgun. The barrel had been placed inside the mouth. The discharge caused catastrophic brain trauma. Death would have been instantaneous. There was no evidence of prolonged suffering, no hesitation marks, no second wound. The shotgun had been purchased 8 days prior to Kurt's death. This detail would later become central to public discussion, not because it suggested foul play, but because it showed preparation. Based on forensic indicators, investigators concluded that Kurt Cobain died on April 5, 1994. This estimate was supported by the level of decomposition, body temperature indicators, environmental conditions inside the room. The fact that his body remained undiscovered for several days would later affect toxicology interpretation, a crucial detail often overlooked. The toxicology report revealed the presence of morphine in Kurt Cobain's blood at a concentration of 1.52 milligrams per liter. Morphine is the primary metabolite of heroin. This number immediately shocked the public. Some argued that such a level would have rendered Kurt unconscious, making it impossible for him to operate a firearm. But forensic toxicology is not that simple. Several critical factors were documented. First, Kurt's body remained undiscovered for days. During that time, post-mortem redistribution occurs, a process in which drug concentrations shift after death. Second, blood samples were drawn close to the heart. Central blood samples often show artificially elevated drug levels compared to peripheral blood. Third, heroin metabolizes rapidly. At the moment of death, the drug may not yet have fully distributed throughout the body. Medical examiners concluded that the toxicology results were consistent with suicide, not homicide. This conclusion was not based on assumption, but on established forensic science. No usable fingerprints were recovered from the shotgun. To some, this sounded suspicious. To forensic investigators, it was not unusual. The environment inside the room was humid. The body remained undiscovered for days. Natural degradation occurs rapidly under such conditions. Additionally, handling of the weapon during discovery and investigation further reduced the likelihood of recovering clear prints. The absence of fingerprints did not contradict the ruling. A handwritten note was found at the scene. Part of it was addressed to an imaginary friend from Kurt's childhood, a detail that revealed emotional regression, not performance. The note expressed several themes: emotional exhaustion, loss of joy in music, a sense of disconnection from life, love for his wife and daughter. Handwriting experts confirmed that the note matched Kurt Cobain's known writing style. Some portions appeared written under the influence of drugs, but the authorship itself was not disputed. The note was not theatrical. It was tired. In the years that followed, theories of murder emerged. They were fueled by grief, disbelief, and the refusal to accept that someone so influential could choose to end his life. Questions were raised about the toxicology levels, the absence of fingerprints, the emotional weight of the note. But speculation is not evidence. The forensic review of the scene, the body, and the autopsy revealed no technical indicators of homicide, no evidence of another person's presence, no contradictory wounds, no forensic inconsistencies. The mystery people wanted was not found in the body, because the body told a consistent story. The autopsy of Kurt Cobain did not uncover a secret plot. It uncovered accumulation, years of untreated mental illness, chronic physical pain, neurological imbalance, severe substance dependence, emotional exhaustion, and the crushing pressure of fame without protection. Kurt Cobain did not die suddenly. His body showed the final moment of a collapse that had been building for decades. Kurt Cobain's music still echoes across generations, but the autopsy reminds us of something far quieter. Behind the icon was a human body, fragile, overloaded, exhausted. This was not a dramatic ending. It was a long goodbye that few noticed while it was happening. And when the silence finally arrived, the body had already said everything there was to say. If this story helped you understand Kurt Cobain beyond the headlines, beyond the myths, take a moment to leave a comment. I read every single one, and I'd like to know what part of this story stayed with you the most. If you value documentaries that focus on facts, context, and respect for the people involved, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps this work reach more people who care about understanding, not sensationalism. And if you think this video can add perspective for someone else, feel free to share it. Thank you for staying until the end.